I'm Stephanie Mitchell, 32 years old, and until recently, I thought I knew what family loyalty meant. My younger sister Melissa and I have always been close, at least that's what I believed. When she got engaged, I happily agreed to finance her dream wedding, all $94,000 of it. I never imagined that the wedding I completely financed would be the one I wouldn't be allowed to attend. 3 days before the ceremony, I received a text message that shattered everything I thought I knew about our relationship. Before I share what happened, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit subscribe, and let's dive into how I ended up paying for a wedding I was uninvited from. Growing up, Melissa and I shared more than just DNA. With a 5-year age gap between us, I naturally fell into the role of protective older sister. She was always the creative one, finger painting on walls while I organized my bookshelf by author. Even with our different personalities, we were inseparable. I braided her hair before school, helped with her homework, and scared away the neighborhood boys who pulled her pigtails. Our childhood wasn't all playground games and ice cream trucks, though. When I was 15 and Melissa just 10, our parents' marriage imploded. Dad had been having an affair with his secretary, such a cliché, but no less devastating. Mom found out when she surprised him at his office for their anniversary. The divorce that followed was ugly, with Dad moving across the country with his new girlfriend almost immediately. Mom fell apart. Catherine Mitchell had been a homemaker for 18 years, and suddenly she was a single mother with 2 daughters and minimal job skills. She found work as a receptionist but fell into a deep depression. That's when I stepped up. 15. I started working at the local grocery store after school, stocking shelves and bagging groceries. My paycheck didn't cover much, but it meant Melissa could still take her dance classes and we could occasionally order pizza on Friday nights, maintaining some semblance of normalcy. "Steph, you shouldn't have to do this," Mom would say, her eyes swollen from crying. "It's just temporary," I'd assure her, though I knew it wasn't. By 16, I was working 30 hours a week while maintaining honor roll. I'd come home, help Melissa with homework, make dinner, and then stay up until midnight doing my own schoolwork. While other teens were going to football games and parties, I was calculating how to stretch our budget until Mom's next payday. Melissa noticed, of course. "Why don't you ever go out with your friends anymore?" she asked once. "I'd rather hang out with you." "Squirt," I told her, tousling her hair. It wasn't entirely a lie. Protecting her from the harsh realities became my purpose. When college application time came around, I only applied to the state university 15 minutes from our house. My guidance counselor was appalled. "With your grades and activities, you could get scholarships to top schools," she insisted. "My family needs me here," I explained simply. She couldn't understand that leaving wasn't an option. I majored in finance, a practical choice that promised stability. Through college, I lived at home, continued working, and was there every night to help Melissa navigate the treacherous waters of middle school, and then high school. Mom slowly improved, eventually getting promoted at work, but our family dynamic was set. I was the responsible one, the provider, the protector. My career path after graduation was methodical. I secured an internship at Preston Financial Advisors, impressed my superiors with my work ethic, and was hired full-time upon completion. I climbed the ranks steadily, becoming known for my practical approach to wealth management and my ability to connect with clients. By 28, I was managing my own portfolio of high-net-worth clients and had started investing in property. Melissa took a different route. Where I was practical, she was passionate. After high school, she attended art school, switching majors 3 times before settling on graphic design. She lived in shared apartments with various roommates, dated a series of artistic types, and worked freelance jobs that barely covered her rent. But she was happy, vibrant in a way I sometimes envied. "You should loosen up, Steph," she'd tell me during our Sunday brunches. "Not everything needs a 5-year plan. And not everything can be improvised," I'd counter, picking up the check as always. Despite our differences, we remained close. I was her safety net, the person she called at 2 a.m. when her car broke down or when a client was late with payment. And I never minded. Taking care of Melissa was as natural as breathing. Our mother Catherine had rebuilt her life admirably. After years at the reception desk, She went back to school for accounting and secured a stable position at a local firm. She dated occasionally but never remarried, telling us, "I've had enough drama for one lifetime." She was proud of both of us in different ways, my stability and Melissa's creativity, though I sometimes caught her worrying about Melissa's financial future. Then James Henderson entered the picture. Melissa met him at an art gallery where her design work was being featured. James came from old money. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the East Coast. He was handsome, charming, and genuinely seemed to appreciate Melissa's artistic spirit. When they started dating, I was cautiously optimistic. Melissa had a history of choosing partners who took advantage of her generosity, but James seemed different. "He doesn't care that I'm not from money," Melissa gushed during one of our brunches. "He says I'm real in a way the people he grew up with aren't." I nodded, happy to see her so happy. But part of me wondered if the difference in their backgrounds would eventually become an issue. I'd seen enough wealthy clients to know that family money often came with family expectations. Within 6 months they were serious. James introduced Melissa to his parents, William and Barbara Henderson, at their estate in the Hamptons. Melissa called me immediately after. "His house has a name, Steph. Not an address, a name. It's called Windermere. Who lives in a house with a name?" I laughed. "Did they have a butler?" "Too. And a chef." I accidentally used the wrong fork at dinner and thought Barbara was going to faint. Despite the cultural differences, the Hendersons were polite, if a bit reserved. When I finally met them at a dinner James arranged, I understood why. They were the kind of wealthy that didn't need to show it. Their confidence, their ease in the world spoke volumes. Barbara Henderson assessed me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, asking pointed questions about my education and career that felt more like an interview than conversation. "Financial advising," she had mused. "How practical. I suppose someone needs to help people manage their money." The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. William barely spoke to me, directing most of his attention to James and Melissa. It was clear they saw me as the less interesting sister, the practical one without Melissa's artistic flair that had charmed their son. But none of that mattered as long as Melissa was happy. And she was radiantly happy, especially after James proposed during a helicopter tour of the coast, landing on a private beach where he had arranged a candlelit dinner under the stars. The diamond he slipped on her finger was larger than anything I could have afforded on my substantial salary. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. But when it comes to family, we often see what we want to see, until reality becomes impossible to ignore. The engagement celebration at the Henderson estate was my first glimpse into what the wedding expectations might be. The champagne was French. The hors d'oeuvres were prepared by a chef who had appeared on multiple cooking shows, and the guest list included people whose names I recognized from business magazines. Melissa looked simultaneously thrilled and terrified, clinging to James's arm as they made rounds. I found her hiding in a bathroom halfway through the evening, hyperventilating. "I can't do this. Steph," she whispered, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "These people. They're a different species." James's second cousin just casually mentioned her summer home in Provence like she was talking about a Starbucks down the street. I dampened a hand towel, monogrammed, "Of course," and gently wiped her face. "Hey, they're just people with more money than sense. You don't need to impress them." "But I do. I'm marrying into this family." Barbara already makes these little comments about my eclectic style, and how James has always appreciated authenticity. It's like I'm a quirky pet he brought home. I hugged her. "If it's too much, you don't have to." "No," she interrupted, straightening. "I love James. He's worth it. I want to fit in. For him." The wedding planning began almost immediately. Barbara Henderson had a clear vision. A society event at the Rosewood Hotel, with at least 300 guests, many of whom Melissa had never met. The estimated budget started at $45,000, which made my stomach drop. I knew from the tension in Melissa's shoulders during planning meetings that she was worried about the cost. 2 weeks after the engagement party, Melissa came to my apartment in tears. "James's parents expect us to have this massive wedding," she sobbed. "They'll contribute to the honeymoon. But they believe the bride's family should pay for the wedding itself. It's tradition. Mom can barely afford her condo, And I've got nothing saved. James offered to pay. But Barbara said it would be emasculating for him and indicative of our future dynamic. What does that even mean? I made her tea and let her cry it out. Watching her distress, I made a decision that seemed perfectly logical at the time. I'll handle it, I said simply. Melissa looked up, eyes wide. What? The wedding. I'll pay for it. All of it. Steph. No, it's too much. You've been saving for a house. I shrug. Houses will always be there. How often does my little sister get married? I forced a smile. Besides, I just landed the Pritchard account. The commission alone will cover a good chunk. The relief and gratitude on her face convinced me I'd made the right choice. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. You're the best sister in the entire world. I'll pay you back someday, I promise. When we shared the news with James, he seemed genuinely moved. That's incredibly generous, Stephanie. Are you sure? Absolutely, I assured him. What else is a big sister for? The first few planning meetings were actually fun. Melissa, James, and I met with wedding planner Charlotte Wilson, a polished woman with a client list full of celebrities. I was included in all decisions, from venue options to color schemes. Melissa wanted my opinion on everything, and for a while it felt like we were kids again, planning her imaginary dream wedding like we used to do with her dolls. But as the guest list expanded and the budget swelled, I began to feel the financial strain, though I kept it to myself. The venue changed from the already expensive Rosewood to the ultra-exclusive Bellamy estate, adding another $15,000. The flowers went from local seasonal arrangements to imported exotic blooms. The cake became a 7-tier masterpiece from a baker who had served royalty. Are you sure about all this? I asked Melissa gently after a tasting session that had somehow added another $5,000 to the catering bill. It seems like a lot of extra expense for things guests won't even notice. A shadow crossed her face. Barbara says these details matter. The Hendersons' friends expect a certain standard. I bit my tongue. It wasn't my place to tell her what kind of wedding to have. After all, I had offered to pay. By the time all selections were finalized, the budget had ballooned to $94,000. More than double the original estimate and nearly all of my savings. I made the transfers without complaint, watching my carefully built financial security dwindle. The house I'd been saving for would have to wait a few more years. I adjusted my budget, cut back on my own expenses, and picked up a few additional clients. It was worth it to see Melissa so happy, I told myself. Charlotte, the wedding planner, became increasingly present in decisions. She and Barbara Henderson formed an alliance of sorts, often exchanging knowing looks when Melissa or I made suggestions. That's a charming idea, Charlotte would say in a tone that clearly meant the opposite. But have you considered this instead? Her alternative was always more elaborate and more expensive. I noticed how Melissa began to defer to them more and more, her own preferences fading into the background. The colorful wildflowers she had initially wanted became structured white rose arrangements. The relaxed bohemian dress she had fallen in love with was replaced by a traditional ball gown more to Barbara's taste. Are you sure this is what you want? I asked her during a rare moment alone. She hesitated, then nodded too quickly. It's growing on me. Besides, James loves the classical look, and it photographs better for the society pages. I didn't even know people still cared about society pages, but I smiled and nodded. It was her day after all. I was just the checkbook. 6 months before the wedding, I noticed a shift in Melissa's behavior toward me. Our weekly brunches became monthly, then sporadic. She started canceling plans last minute, always with the same excuse. Wedding planning with Barbara. Can't you plan with me instead? I asked after the third cancellation. I am paying for it after all. I tried to keep my tone light, but a hint of hurt crept in. There was a pause on the other end of the phone. Barbara has connections with all the vendors, Melissa finally said. It's just easier this way. I began to feel like an ATM rather than a participant in my sister's special day. Charlotte would email me invoices with curt notes like "need payment by Friday," or "please transfer additional funds for upgraded linens." No explanation, no consultation. Just expectations that I would comply. And I did every time. At the 6-month mark, there was supposed to be a menu tasting at the venue. I cleared my schedule, excited to finally be included again. The night before, I texted Melissa to confirm the time. "Oh," she wrote back. "We actually did that last week. Barbara thought it would be more efficient with fewer people." I stared at my phone, a knot forming in my stomach. They had excluded me from a major decision for a wedding I was financing entirely. When I called Melissa to express my hurt, she was defensive. "You're so busy with work, Steph. We were trying to be considerate of your time." "I specifically took time off for this," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, I didn't know that. Look, we chose the salmon and beef options. Everyone likes those." "I'm allergic to salmon," I reminded her. "There will be beef too," she replied, missing the point entirely. It wasn't just the wedding planning where I felt Melissa slipping away. She had a new circle of friends now, James's friends and their partners. They went on weekend trips to Nantucket and took spin classes at exclusive studios. Melissa started using phrases like summer as a verb and referencing people I'd never heard of as if I should know them. The maid of honor, Allison, was particularly troubling. She was James's cousin's wife, a woman with perfect highlights and a perpetual look of mild disdain. At the engagement dinner I finally attended, she barely acknowledged me, then pulled Melissa aside for an urgent conversation that left my sister looking anxious for the rest of the evening. Dinner with the Hendersons became a monthly ordeal. I was always invited. "Your family now," Barbara would insist with a smile that never reached her eyes, but I inevitably left feeling like an outsider. They discuss people, places, and events I had no connection to, occasionally explaining things to me in the condescending tone one might use with a child. During one such dinner, I excused myself to use the restroom and overheard Barbara speaking to Melissa in the hallway. "Darling, of course we appreciate Stephanie's contribution. It's very generous. I just wonder if she'll be comfortable with the other guests. The governor will be attending, and the Whitmores, who are practically American royalty. Stephanie's job is admirable, but she might feel out of place. Steph is great with people," I heard my sister respond, but her defense was weak, uncertain. "Of course she is, in her context. This is different. We just want everyone to enjoy themselves without feeling awkward. Think about it." I slipped back to the dining room before they returned, my cheeks burning with humiliation. The next blow came when Melissa called to tell me about a change in bridesmaids' dresses. "We're going with Marchesa now," she said casually, as if this wasn't a significant change. "But we already paid deposits on the other dresses," I said. "Custom ones from that boutique you loved." "I know, but Barbara found out that the Woodson wedding last year used the same designer. And we can't have that. Marchesa is much more exclusive. And expensive," I added. "That's an extra $6,000, Melissa." There was a pause. "I didn't realize it would be that much," she said, though I suspected she did. "If it's too much." "No," I sighed. "It's fine. I want you to have what you want." "Thanks, Steph. You're the best." The relief in her voice was palpable. "Oh, and the florist needs another $8,000 for the upgraded centerpieces. Charlotte says they're absolutely stunning." After hanging up, I sat in my apartment looking at my nearly empty savings account. The house I'd been dreaming of was now years away. I had canceled my vacation plans and started taking lunch to work instead of ordering in. Meanwhile, Melissa was spending thousands on dresses no one would remember a week after the wedding. I tried to discuss my concerns a few times, but Melissa became immediately defensive. "If you can't afford it, just say so," she snapped during one conversation. "James can pay. He's offered several times." "It's not that I can't afford it," I clarified, hurt by her tone. "I just wonder if all this expense is necessary. Does the ice sculpture really need to be $17,000? It's an ice sculpture of Michelangelo's David, Steph. It's art, not just ice. Barbara says it'll be the talking point of the reception." I bit back a reply about what people would really be saying. It wasn't worth the fight. The final dress fitting should have been a special moment between sisters. I arrived at the boutique excited to see Melissa in her gown, only to discover that the fitting had been rescheduled for the previous day. Barbara, Charlotte, and Allison had all attended. Why wasn't I told? I asked Melissa later, not bothering to hide my hurt. "It was last minute," she said, not meeting my eyes. The seamstress had a cancellation. All three of them managed to make it with no notice, but I wasn't even called? You were in meetings all day, she replied defensively. It wasn't personal, but it was, and we both knew it. I was being systematically excluded from a wedding that wouldn't exist without my financial support. The worst part was watching my sister transform from the down-to-earth girl I had raised into someone who cared more about impressing the Hendersons than including her own family. 3 days before the wedding, I received an email from the catering company requesting the final payment of $15,000. I transferred the funds immediately, as I had done dozens of times over the past year. It cleaned out the last of my investment account, but I consoled myself with the thought that it was almost over. Soon Melissa would be married, and our relationship could return to normal. That evening, I was finalizing my packing for the weekend, my bridesmaid dress that I had paid for, shoes, jewelry, and my speech, which I had rewritten countless times to get just right. My phone buzzed with a text message from Melissa. I opened it, expecting last-minute details about the rehearsal dinner. Instead, I read, "Steph, I don't know how to say this, but it might be better if you don't come to the wedding. Things have gotten complicated with the seating and the Hendersons feel it would create an awkward dynamic. I'm so sorry. Can we talk about this after the honeymoon? Love you." I stared at the message, certain I had misunderstood. This couldn't be real. After everything, the $94,000, the year of planning, our entire lives as sisters, she was uninviting me via text? 3 days before? I called her immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She didn't answer. I called again. And again. On the 4th try, she picked up. "Melissa, what the hell?" My voice cracked with emotion. "Tell me this is a mistake." She sighed, and the resignation in that sound told me everything. "I'm sorry, Steph. It's just..." Barbara was going through the final guest list and realized that having you there might make some of the other guests uncomfortable. The governor's coming, and 3 state senators and James's father's business associates. "And what?" I demanded. "I'll embarrass you? By existing? By being the person who paid for every single thing at this wedding?" "It's not like that," she said weakly. "It's just, you're different from them. You don't know how to act in those circles." The betrayal knocked the wind out of me. "I've been to charity galas with clients worth more than the entire Henderson family," I said quietly. "I know which fork to use, Melissa. This isn't about etiquette." "Barbara thinks." "I don't care what Barbara thinks. I care what my sister thinks. The sister I helped raise. The sister whose wedding I'm paying for." There was a long pause. "We're grateful for your financial contribution," she said finally, her voice taking on a formal tone I'd never heard her use with me before. "But perhaps it would be best. Let me talk to her." A male voice in the background, "James." There was a rustling sound as the phone changed hands. "Stephanie." James's polished voice came through the speaker. "I want you to know that this wasn't an easy decision. We truly appreciate everything you've done for us financially. It's been incredibly generous. But not generous enough to earn me an invitation to my own sister's wedding?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "My mother had some concerns. She did some looking into your background, your clients, your social media. She feels that your presence might create tensions with some of our more conservative guests." "Looking into my background? What am I, a security risk? I'm her sister." "It's nothing personal," he continued smoothly. "It's about creating the right atmosphere for everyone. Melissa is entering a new chapter of her life now, with new social obligations and expectations. And I don't fit into those," I finished flatly. "I wouldn't put it quite like that." I heard murmuring in the background, then Melissa came back on the line. "Steph, please understand. This is really important for James's family. His father has political connections, and they're very image conscious. After the wedding, we can go back to normal." "Normal?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Melissa, there is no going back from this. You're choosing these people over the person who has supported you your entire life, who raised you when mom couldn't, who worked at 16 so you could keep taking dance classes, who gave up every penny of her savings for your special day. You're making me feel guilty," she said, her voice small. Good. You should feel guilty. This is the most selfish, entitled thing you've ever done. See, this is exactly why. She began, but I cut her off. Why what? Why I'm being excluded? Because I'm calling you on your bullshit? Because I won't smile and nod while you and the Hendersons treat me like an embarrassing relative you need to hide away. You're overreacting, she said. But I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. I paid $94,000 for a wedding I'm now banned from attending. Tell me, exactly how should I be reacting? There was a long silence. Finally, she said, I'm sorry you feel this way. I hope someday you'll understand. I understand perfectly, I replied. Goodbye, Melissa. I hung up and collapsed onto my couch, the phone falling from my numb fingers. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating that I couldn't even cry. I sat in silence as night fell, staring at the wall, replaying every moment of our relationship and wondering how it had come to this. Eventually, I called my best friend Taylor, the only person I felt I could talk to. She arrived 20 minutes later with a bottle of wine and fierce indignation on my behalf. She did what? Taylor exclaimed after I explained the situation. After you paid for everything? That's not just rude, it's sociopathic. She's being influenced by them, I said, surprised to find myself defending Melissa even now. The Hendersons, especially Barbara. They've been working on her for months. That's no excuse, Taylor insisted. She's a grown woman, not some teenager being peer pressured. She made this choice. The truth in those words hit me hard. Melissa had made a choice: money and status over family. Over me. What are you going to do? Taylor asked. I thought about it, swirling my wine in its glass. I could create a scene, demand my money back, expose the situation to all our mutual friends. I could show up anyway, force them to physically remove me if they wanted me gone. But in the end, what would that accomplish? It wouldn't change Melissa's choice. It wouldn't heal the wound that had been opened. Nothing, I said finally. I'm going to do nothing. The money's gone. If she values their approval more than our relationship, then causing a scene will only justify their decision in her mind. That's incredibly mature of you, Taylor said, looking concerned. But are you sure? She deserves to face consequences for this. She will, I said quietly. Just not from me. In the deepest part of my heart, beneath the hurt and betrayal, I still loved my sister. And I couldn't bring myself to ruin what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, even if she had shattered mine. On what should have been one of the most meaningful days of my life as a sister, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the detritus of a year's worth of wedding planning fabric swatches, venue brochures, sample invitations, which, ironically, still listed me as maid of honor. Taylor had offered to come over to take me out to distract me, but I declined. This was a grief I needed to experience fully. I opened a bottle of champagne, not the Dom Perignon that would be flowing at the reception, but a decent Prosecco I had been saving for a special occasion. To $94,000 well spent, I toasted the empty room, taking a long swallow directly from the bottle. Throughout the day, my phone buzzed with social media notifications. Despite being uninvited, I was still connected to enough mutual friends to see glimpses of the event unfolding. Chloe, a college friend of Melissa's, posted a photo of the venue entrance, decorated with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers. #Henderson wedding is straight out of a fairy tale. Read the caption. I scrolled through more posts, each one a fresh wound. The ice sculpture of David had indeed been created, standing majestically beside a seafood bar that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent. The bridesmaids, including Allison, who had taken my place as maid of honor, wore the Marchesa gowns I had paid for, posing with champagne flutes on the terrace where the ceremony had taken place. And then there she was, Melissa, radiant in her ball gown, looking every inch the society bride she had transformed herself into. James stood beside her, handsome in his tuxedo, his arm possessively around her waist. They were surrounded by the Hendersons and various important-looking people I didn't recognize. Everyone was smiling, champagne in hand, celebrating love and union and family. A family that apparently had no place for me. My phone rang, startling me out of my masochistic scrolling. It was Mom. Stephanie. Her voice was hushed, background noise suggesting she was at the reception. "Are you okay? I just heard from Taylor what happened." "I'm fine," I lied. "How's the wedding?" "Ridiculous," she said. And I could hear the anger in her voice. All these people Melissa doesn't even know, preening and networking like it's a business conference. I don't understand how she could do this to you. I raised you both better than this. It's her day, I said mechanically. She should have what she wants. Not at the expense of basic human decency. I'm leaving right now. This whole thing is a farce. No, Mom, I said quickly. Don't make a scene. It won't change anything, and it'll just give Barbara Henderson more reason to think we don't belong in their world. I don't want to belong in their world if this is how they treat family, she retorted, but I could tell she would stay. Mom had always avoided confrontation, even when it was justified. Just tell me she's happy, I said, my voice small. Tell me this was worth it. There was a pause. She looks happy, Mom said finally. But Stephanie, this isn't the daughter I raised. I don't recognize this person. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, not bothering to turn on lights as evening fell. The champagne bottle was empty now. My head slightly fuzzy from drinking on an empty stomach. I picked up a photo album from the coffee table, pictures of Melissa and me throughout the years. Us building sandcastles at the beach. Me teaching her to ride a bike. Her high school graduation, where I had cheered so loudly people turned to stare. Had I somehow contributed to this? By always being the responsible one, always picking up the slack, had I taught her that my feelings didn't matter? That I would always be there, no matter how she treated me? Monday morning came with brutal clarity. I dragged myself to work, makeup carefully applied to hide my sleepless night, and dove into client meetings with forced enthusiasm. Several colleagues had attended the wedding, clients of James's father, and they studiously avoided mentioning it around me. Word had spread quickly. Stephanie? My assistant Jennifer poked her head into my office around lunchtime. Are you okay? You've been staring at that same spreadsheet for an hour. I blinked, realizing she was right. Just tired, I said with a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Big weekend. She nodded, clearly not believing me but kind enough not to press. The Matthews portfolio is ready for review whenever you are. Work became my refuge in the weeks that followed. I stayed late, came in early, took on additional clients. Anything to avoid going home to an empty apartment filled with memories and questions. Financially, the wedding had devastated me. My savings were gone. The down payment for the house I'd been planning to buy had evaporated. I'd even dipped into my emergency fund for the final payments. 32, I was essentially starting over. I created a new budget, cutting expenses to the bone. No more takeout, no more premium gym membership. No more weekend getaways. It would take years to rebuild what I had lost. But the financial damage was nothing compared to the emotional toll. I couldn't sleep. Food tasted like cardboard. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. Friends invited me out. But I declined, unable to bear the pitying looks, the careful avoidance of Melissa's name. 2 weeks after the wedding, Instagram informed me that Melissa Henderson had tagged me in a post. With trembling fingers, I opened the notification. It was a photo of Melissa and James on a beach in Bali, sunburned and smiling, cocktails in hand. The caption read, "Best honeymoon ever. Thank you to everyone who made our special day possible. Especially at Steph Mitchell for her generous gift. Love you, sis. Hashtag Henderson Rifter." The casual mention, as if I had given her a stand mixer rather than my entire financial security, made me physically ill. I rushed to the bathroom and threw up, heaving until there was nothing left but bitter bile. She texted a few days later. "We're back. Bali was amazing. Got you a souvenir. Coffee soon." I didn't respond. What could I possibly say? That I was happy she enjoyed the honeymoon while I ate ramen noodles to save money? That I was glad the generous gift of $94,000 had purchased her entry into the world she clearly valued more than our relationship? My silence must have registered because mutual friends began reaching out, awkwardly trying to mediate. Melissa feels really bad about what happened. Our childhood friend Jessica told me over coffee. She says it wasn't her decision. She's a grown woman, I replied, echoing Taylor's words. No one forced her to send that text. The Hendersons have a lot of influence. Stop, I cut her off. Please don't defend this. There is no defense. The story spread through our social circle, opinions dividing predictably. Some were appalled on my behalf, cutting ties with Melissa in solidarity. Others thought I was overreacting, that family should forgive anything. A few suggested I should have expected something like this when dealing with those kinds of people. Through it all, I maintained my silence with Melissa. Not out of spite or punishment, but because I genuinely didn't know what to say. The betrayal had broken something fundamental in me, something I wasn't sure could be repaired. 3 weeks after they returned from their honeymoon, I came home from work to find Melissa sitting on the floor outside my apartment door, a small gift bag beside her. She jumped up when she saw me, her expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Steph," she said, her voice small, "you haven't answered my texts." I unlocked my door without responding, then paused. As hurt as I was, leaving her in the hallway felt petty. "You can come in," I said, not looking at her. "For a few minutes." My apartment was immaculate. Cleaning had become another way to avoid thinking. Melissa followed me inside, hovering uncertainly in the entryway. "I brought you something," she said, holding out the gift bag. "From Bali." I took it mechanically and set it on the counter without opening it. "Why are you here, Melissa?" She twisted her hands together, a nervous habit from childhood. "I wanted to see you. To explain." "Explain what?" "How you uninvited me from a wedding I paid for." "Via text message?" My voice remained eerily calm, surprising even me. "I think that was quite clear." "It wasn't my choice," she said quickly. "Barbara and William." "Stop." I held up a hand. "Just stop. You're not a child. No one held a gun to your head. You don't understand the pressure I was under." Tears welled in her eyes. They were going to cut James off financially if the wedding wasn't perfect, if it didn't have the right people, the right connections. And I wasn't the right people, I finished for her. "Barbara did some digging," Melissa continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "She found out about that client of yours who got arrested for fraud last year. And your college roommate who's now a prominent LGBT activist. And your donation to that political campaign they oppose. She said having you there would create complications with certain guests. So she compiled a dossier on me," I said flatly. "And instead of telling her to mind her own business, you and James decided I had to go." "It wasn't like that," she insisted, tears now flowing freely. "It was impossible. You don't know what they're like, how they control everything through money and connections. James could lose his trust fund, his position at his father's company, everything. And that was more important than having your sister at your wedding? The sister who raised you? Who gave up everything to make this wedding happen?" "No. I don't know." She collapsed onto my couch, sobbing. "I made a terrible mistake. I was caught up in it all, the glamour, the status. Being a Henderson meant something, and I lost sight of what really matters." I stood watching her cry, feeling strangely detached. Part of me wanted to comfort her as I always had, to tell her everything would be okay. But a stronger part recognized that this pattern, Melissa making poor choices and me fixing them, had contributed to where we now found ourselves. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay you back every penny. James and I will." "This isn't about the money," I interrupted. "It never was." "Then what can I do? Tell me how to fix this." "I don't know if you can," I admitted. "You chose money over me, Melissa. Not just at the wedding but every step of the way this past year. You let them change you into someone who would discard family for social standing. That's not something an apology can undo. Please," she begged. "I need my big sister. I've made such a mess of everything." For the first time in our lives, I didn't rush to her rescue. "I think you should go." "Steph, I'm not saying never," I clarified. "I'm saying not now. I need time. And honestly, you need to figure out who you are without me cleaning up your messes." She left still crying, the unopened gift remaining on my counter. After the door closed behind her, I sank to the floor, my legs no longer able to support me. The confrontation had drained what little emotional energy I had left. That night, I made an appointment with a therapist. Dear Morgan was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that immediately put me at ease. "Tell me why you're here," she said during our first session. I explained the situation, trying to stick to facts rather than emotions. When I finished, she nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like you're grieving," she said. "Not just the loss of money or even your sister's betrayal, but the loss of your identity as the provider, the protector." Her words struck me with the force of revelation. My entire self-concept had been built around taking care of Melissa, making sacrifices for her happiness. Who was I without that role? "I don't know who I am if I'm not the responsible one," I admitted. "The one who fixes everything." "Then perhaps this is an opportunity," Dr. Morgan suggested. "A chance to discover who Stephanie is when she puts herself first." Over the next few months, I worked with Dr. Morgan to examine the patterns in my relationship with Melissa, and in my life generally. I realized I had been enabling her dependence while denying myself the things I wanted, all under the guise of being a good sister. "Your generosity wasn't just about Melissa," Dr. Morgan pointed out during one session. "It was also about control. As long as you were the one with the resources, the one making the sacrifices, you got to be the good one, the morally superior one." I bristled at first, but the insight resonated uncomfortably. There had been a certain satisfaction in being the responsible sister, the one everyone could rely on. It had given me a sense of purpose, of worth. "The question now," she continued, "is what gives you worth outside of that role?" It was a question I had never allowed myself to consider. And finding the answer became my new purpose. 6 months after the wedding that I paid for but never attended, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The financial recovery was slower than I'd hoped. Rebuilding savings takes time. But I had implemented a strict budget and taken on a few select high-commission clients that accelerated the process. More importantly, I had begun to establish boundaries in all my relationships. I stopped being the default problem solver for friends and family. I learned to say no without guilt. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during the years I focused primarily on Melissa. "Taylor had been right beside me through it all. I barely recognize you," she joked one evening as I declined to help a mutual friend move for the 3rd time that year. The old Stephanie would have already rented the truck and bought the pizza. "The old Stephanie was a pushover," I replied with a smile. "The new one values her weekend." Melissa had tried to contact me multiple times after our confrontation. Texts, emails, even handwritten letters expressing remorse and asking for forgiveness. I read them all but maintained my distance, needing to break the pattern of rushing to emotional reconciliation without real change. 3 months in, James reached out independently, something I hadn't expected. "I owe you an apology," he said when I reluctantly agreed to meet him for coffee. "What happened was inexcusable. I should have stood up to my parents." "Why didn't you?" I asked, curious despite myself. He looked down, clearly uncomfortable. "Fear mostly. I've never defied them in anything important. Their approval has always been the measure of my worth." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "It's not an excuse. Just the truth. And now I'm trying to be a better husband than I was a fiancé. Melissa has been standing up to them about other things since the wedding. She refused to attend a gala they hosted last month because my mother made a disparaging comment about your mother." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. Melissa avoiding a high society event out of family loyalty? That was new. "She misses you," James added. "More than I think you realize." I nodded, not committing to anything but feeling a small crack in the wall I had built around my heart. When I finally agreed to meet Melissa for coffee 5 months after the wedding, it was on my terms and with clear boundaries. We met at a neutral location. Not her new luxury condo or my apartment with its memories. She looked different somehow. Less polished. More like the sister I had grown up with. Her designer purse was gone, replaced by a worn leather bag I recognized from her college days. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice steadier than it had been during our last encounter. "You're welcome," I replied simply. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke again. "I've been in therapy," she said, trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I let myself become someone I don't even recognize. And have you figured it out? She nodded slowly. I think I've always felt less than. Less successful than you, less focused, less responsible. The Hendersons made me feel special, chosen. Being accepted by them seemed to validate me in a way I'd never experienced. You were always special, I said quietly. To me. To Mom. I know that now. She took a deep breath. I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were. I know that's not possible. I miss my sister. And I'd like a chance to show you that I've changed. Words are easy, I replied. Actions take time. I know. And I'm willing to take that time. Whatever you need. We talked for over an hour. Not just about the wedding but about our entire relationship. I explained how my caretaking had often been a way to avoid my own life, my own needs. She admitted how her dependence had been partly a choice, a way to avoid full responsibility. I don't want to be that person anymore, she said firmly. For either of us. It wasn't an instant reconciliation with hugs and tears and promises of a perfect future. It was tentative, cautious. We agreed to occasional text check-ins, perhaps another coffee in a few weeks. Baby steps toward a new kind of relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than codependence. The money was still gone, of course. Melissa and James had offered to repay it, but I declined. Consider it an expensive lesson for all of us, I told them. Some debts can't be repaid with money, and some lessons are worth their cost. As I rebuilt my life and my sense of self, I came to understand that the wedding debacle, painful as it was, had forced me to confront patterns I might otherwise have continued indefinitely. Sometimes the most loving relationships can also be the most limiting, binding us to roles that no longer serve our growth. The greatest gift I gave myself wasn't financial security or even self-respect, though both were important. It was the permission to exist as myself, not just as someone's supporter, provider, or protector, to have needs and express them, to set boundaries and hold them, to value myself as much as I had always valued others. I still loved my sister, and I believed we would find our way back to a relationship, but it would be a healthier one, with both of us standing on our own feet rather than one carrying the other. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrifice but holding people accountable, including ourselves. Sometimes losing everything we thought mattered reveals what truly does. And sometimes, the most difficult journeys lead us exactly where we need to go. I still haven't reached that place of complete healing, and maybe I never will. But I'm moving forward one step at a time, building a life that honors my worth rather than seeking it through sacrifice. And in the end, isn't that the most valuable gift we can give ourselves? Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever struggled with setting boundaries or finding your worth outside of what you do for others, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Has someone's betrayal ever led to unexpected growth in your life? Please like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to redefine yourself and your relationships. Remember, your value isn't measured by how much you give. It's inherent in who you are.